Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's dialing in today from different parts of the world. I see more people are joining in. This is an annual webinar we do on the top employees topic. So really excited. Thanks to our external panelists today, Manoj and Asad. Really glad to have you here and congratulations in advance. We'll talk more about the topic and your companies. To set up the agenda for how we are going to use the rest of the time, we will start by talking about this assessment, top employers assessment. What does this mean? Everest Group has been doing this for a very long time and we have been publishing the results for a few years now, but we recognize a lot of our listeners today may be new to this. So we will spend some time talking through what this analysis is, what this is not, what the methodology is, how to read the output, etc. We will then, very importantly, dive into the results for 2024. So this is the big unveil, and we will share the results for top employers across both categories, GBS and tech, across 6 markets or 5 unique markets. And then the part we are most excited about, we will talk about some of the key takeaways from the study, and not just from our assessment, but also from our esteemed panelists today, Manoj and Asad. We will talk about how they make things happen in their organizations and what are some of the best practices that our listeners who are watching this live today or who are going to tune in later can learn from. With that, we will move on. And why don't we start with a quick poll question, right? We'll bring it up. We'll leave it open for a few seconds to get everybody's inputs in. But as we see the talent situation normalizing this year, attrition rates have been on the downward trend for 6 straight quarters. Which dimension of your employee value proposition do you think still needs improvement? So there are a few options that you can see down there. You can select one or multiple. We see some answers starting to come in, and we'll give it a few more seconds to see what the results are.
Rohit, as we're already starting to see some results come in, what's your take on this?
Yeah, and Shivangee, the charts are still changing, but I can see clearly the one which is moving ahead than others is career growth prospects. Almost 60% or more respondents believe that is an area of improvement. And then it is followed by compensation and benefit, which is always, in desired area of improvement. I'm not at all surprised with this. In fact, as we will see shortly in the takeaways from this assessment, the perception around employers investing in career growth prospects has suffered a bit. So I think the audience is well in sync with what we are also picking up. Let us move on. And Shivangee, I'll request you to walk us through some of the key details in terms of the background. Tell us more about what top employers assessment is about, especially for our first-time listeners today.
Sure, Rohit. Rohit, it's crucial to realize that in today's competitive market, securing top talent has become a full-blown war. Exceptional talent is the golden ticket, and GBS and tech employers need to revamp their strategies for building and maintaining a strong employer brand in local markets. But let's be honest, it's easier said than done. While GBS and tech employers regularly collect feedback to make improvements, they can be blindsided by their views on their brand and fail to seek the much needed outside-in employee perspective. This is where Everest Group Top Employers Analysis comes in. It provides an outside-in view, complementing the internal data companies already have for a holistic understanding. This analysis, by design, is based on publicly available information and captures prospective employees' perceptions. The data for this analysis is sourced from a range of reputable platforms, including global employee forums such as Glassdoor, Indeed, and Fishbowl, regional and local employee forums such as Ambition Box Comparably and GoWork Poland, social media and professional media platforms such as Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and LinkedIn, along with a few others. To clarify on the next slide, This study, by design, serves as a reflection of employee and candidate sentiment, capturing the genuine perceptions of the current workforce. The data we present is unbiased and non-manipulated. We focus on reporting from the employee and candidate perspective, providing you with a view for those directly impacted by your brand. Our analysis includes a comparison of your brand perception with peers in the local market, allowing you to see where you stand in relation to others, and is targeted assessment specifically for GBS and tech branding. It is important to note what this analysis is not. It is not a survey or interview-based research of your employees or target candidates. The analysis does not use your inputs. All privileged information that Everest Group has via conversations and extensive project work we do with most of these companies intentionally sits in a separate database that is confidential and under NDA and is not utilized for the purpose of this assessment. This study does not intend to report reality, and the reality may be different from perception. However, it is important to recognize that over a period of time, people act on perception, so it does ultimately become the truth. Finally, this is not a prescriptive study. This is an additional piece of information which you should know and think through. This analysis can be leveraged by GBS and tech employers to validate and identify gaps in your internal pulse surveys by comparing them with your external branding strategies to see what is working and what is not, and to leverage this independent outside assessment in your branding initiatives. We often get asked how we select companies for this assessment, Rohit. And at the end of the day, at Everest Group, we track more than 9,000 plus GBS and tech centers across locations. But we cannot analyze all 9,000 every year. However, we do follow a comprehensive three-step approach. We select the largest companies in terms of revenue in each sector. We pick the most larger centers. Then we also work with Everest Group SMEs to pick the most popular GBS and tech centers. They may not necessarily be the largest, but are very popular in local markets. However, we do eliminate companies. This year, for example, we started with a long list of 1,200 companies, but ended up analyzing only 800 companies because of lack of data availability. While I said we do not impose confidential data, it is important to recognize that Everest Group SMEs do review these findings to look for some logical inconsistencies, and accordingly, we recheck. We might still report the original findings, and if that is what the data says, even if in reality it is contradictory to the actual benchmarks. On the next slide, we have the parameters we used for this assessment, which is very comprehensive, looking at employee satisfaction grade, perception of compensation and benefits, perception of work environment, that is a combination of many other sub-parameters. Then we also have perception on career opportunities, investment in learning and development, and diversity and inclusion. Again, perception being the key term here, the study analyzes and reports the perception across all of these parameters. Moving on, this is all brought together on this slide, which showcases the approach to determine the overall positioning of each organization. We summarize everything on a 2x2. We have a plot for each location and type of employer. On the x-axis, we have employer brand perception, which is aggregated on the basis of compensation and benefits, work environment, career development, and diversity and inclusion. On the y-axis, we have perceived success in the talent market, which is an aggregate of perception of attrition, joiner exit ratio, and employee satisfaction grade. We combine these ratings on both the x and the y-axis to plot each company on the plot. Each dot that you will see on the subsequent slides will represent an employer. There are more detailed analysis on the trends by industry, parameters, location, scale, etc. in the full report, which is now available for download. Rohit, now without further ado, it would be helpful if you could walk us through the key findings of the report and also reveal the much awaited results of which companies make it as a top employer in GBS and tech in 2024.
Hey, thanks for the background, Shivangi. And yes, before the big, unveil, I want to clarify a couple of questions that we are, getting, and we get them very often. So one, yes, all the slides will be shared. So everybody who's listening in today and who's registered, you will get all the slides. And second, no, we do not do rankings. So the assessment that Shivangi talked about, the 2 by 2 plot that you showed, companies are only differentiated on the basis of if they are part of the top employer quadrant or they are not. Given the multiplicity of parameters that are going in and a lot of qualitative analysis, we do not do direct ranking comparison. Now, without further delay, as we go to the next slide, just want to show how the results will be uh, appearing. So we have looked at three markets, India, Philippines, and Poland, collectively accounting for more than 70% of the offshore nearshore GBS, global business services market. Uh, Almost about 400 GBS organizations from these three countries have been uh, analyzed and then evaluated. So what you will see is plots like these in the main report. Again, we will show a couple of versions of this today, but how much we can love the data as analysts, and we have lots of data in this report, it is hard to unveil everything in a single webinar. Similarly, the detailed reports, the links of which will be provided during the conversation, as well as they will be available in the version of this document that we will publish. We will have yet another 400 plus companies evaluated as their brand perception or as tech employers across India, US, UK, again, three of the largest tech markets. Like I said, we cannot show all six on the call today, but we do want to unveil the results. So let me start with the GBS India market analysis. And of the 210 companies that were finally evaluated in the published results, we have a little less than 20% being part of the top quadrant. You can see names of these companies ranging across industries. And I'm really happy to congratulate each one of these companies, especially Asad and Manoj, who are representing Thomson Reuters and DSM for management us today. Once again, congratulations. We have spoken about this in the last few days, and it is truly remarkable in terms of all the effort that your organizations put in and how that is visible in the employee sentiment. Before we move on, let me take a pause. Manoj, starting with you, and Asad, I'd love to hear your comments next. But what I want to hear from you is coming into this discussion and looking at this type of analysis, what are your thoughts about the relevance and applicability of this kind of assessment in the first place?
Well, Rohit, first of all, congratulations to the Everest Group on bringing this to life. I think having this data in front of you not just gives us confidence on where we stand, but also tells us what it takes to be relevant in the job market today. Our only asset are people. Buildings can come and go, workstations can come and go, but what really matters to us is the gray matter between the pair of ears that we have. And that's what we take pride in, and that's what we take in sourcing, and that's what we take in nurturing the pride and effort that we take in that. So I think with this kind of data, with this kind of insights, we're able to, one, be assured about the direction we are, and also learn from others on what does it take to continuously move the needle on this, because things keep evolving month on month, year on year. And how do we stay relevant amongst all the parameters that matter to people and matter to the values of the company that we are representing?
Thanks, Manoj. Asad?
Thank you. First of all, good evening, everyone, and great to be part of this webinar. And like Manoj mentioned about relevance, excuse me, just to add to that, I think Shivangi mentioned the fact of having an outside-in view. You could be biased about your own strategy and actually execution part of it, but having such data, such vast collection of organizations coming together to actually represent and understand where you are at, it actually gives you a sense of direction that are we on the right track? Are we the efforts that we've actually put in to make sure that the employee value proposition, the the um, the direction of vision that we have for the organization. Are we in the right track or not? So that's one aspect of it. Second, I think it's really, really important for us to continue to actually have such inputs come in, because as we look at the evolution of talent today, the requirement and the needs of developing our talent is actually changing at a breakneck pace, right? So the investments that we're making, the organizations, the way we are actually driving the strategy, is that working, and how well is it working, and what else needs to be done to course correct? And it's heartening to see that for TR, it's been great, second year in a row for India, and then excellent for us in terms of actually having seen this report for Philippines as well. So really glad to have this come through, and like Manoj mentioned, I'll just echo his thoughts. Congratulations, Everest Group, for it's not easy to pull this through, and the amount of effort and hard work that would have gone. So thank you for bringing this to life for all of us.
Thanks, Asad, and I'll agree on behalf of Shivangee. Shivangee and her team have been putting in a lot of effort over the last several weeks and months to pull this together. And I'd like to remind our audience again that this is just a webinar document that we're presenting today. The two reports, the one for GBS and one for tech employers, they will go live today as well, and the links to those reports will be available. You don't need to be a subscriber of Everest Group Research to access these reports. Unlike many of our other research, we believe this is our responsibility to share this kind of analysis with the community, so you'll be able to access the reports. I'll come back to a couple of other things that you said, Asad, around change and the need to keep up, course correct regularly, because I think the data, and we have done year-on-year analysis of last a couple of years, so there are some very interesting trends there as well. As we move on, I would like to show one example of the results for US. Looking at the top employers for tech talent in US, again, almost 205 employers were rated, and congratulations to all the leading companies. There is often this discussion around how tech companies dominate the market. Do they? Absolutely. I see Salesforce, Google, NVIDIA, a few others, but there are many others as well. And we see companies from across different industries, showing up there in the top quadrant. So there is something that each company can do. As I said earlier, we do not have time to go through all the six sections today in detail. So what we want to do is we want to just congratulate all the companies on the next slide who have been recognized as top employers. You will see all the companies across each of the markets for both the GBS and the tech talent are listed here. Congratulations if you're seeing your company's name here. If you do not, then again, you may be part of the larger assessment. We only declare companies who are in the top quadrant by name. All the other dots that are not in the top quadrant, only the companies themselves will know which way they are. So this is mainly to celebrate success and take that story to a broader audience. And with that, we will pivot into our next section, where we really want to use the rest of the time discussing with Manoj and Asad that while we absolutely admire their organizations and celebrate their success and the strength of their employer brands, what we really want to learn is how do they do it, because we are sure it's not easy. Shivangee, I remember you have something for our audience today before we move to the next section.
Yes, I would like to take a moment on this slide to make a special offer that we have for enterprises and GBS to our audience. Please watch out for the links in the comment section and follow the steps on this slide to request for a complimentary benchmark for your organization. While we're only celebrating the top employers position, any company specific feedback will be shared with respective companies on a one-on-one basis. Now, over to you, Rohit, to unpack this further and discuss some additional insights from the study.
Right. And then really, I don't want to take a lot of time. Asad, Manoj have been waiting patiently. And I think they are the real contributors today to share from their experience. So let's move to slide 18. Let's talk about some of the key takeaways. To summarize, right, and I'll really encourage everyone listening in to go and check out the full report. But to summarize, one of the 5 key takeaways is that the brand perception has been deteriorating since 2022. Market took a U-turn. It is no longer an employer's market. It is an employees market. It turned to shift the power a little bit in favor of employers. Like I said, attrition for last 6 quarters has been on the downward trend. Demand supply gaps have eased up a little bit, though practically different companies may struggle. What that shows is that employees are not really happy across. They are feeling as if they are kind of not getting the desired attention always, and as a result, the brand perception across markets have dipped by about 3% or more. Poland is the only market among all analyzed this year which has bucked the trend, and UK is the market which had the most severe deterioration in brand perception ratings year on year. Let me ask you, Manoj, as you look at some of the trends, and we were talking a few days ago as well. Looking at the increasing competition and then the increasingly unforgiving environment, deterioration in brand perception year on year, tell us, how do you manage to improve your brand perception continuously for DSM for Manage?
Yeah, Rohit, what has changed over the years is the aspirations of the young talents that look forward to a company that just doesn't give them a job, but gives them a career and gives them a source of learning. It also, if you go back to the needs of the young talent that we look for, they also look for a place that cares for them. Now, in the world, there may be a few brands that one can associate with, and these are very B2C brands which people have grown up with. But majority of the brands are brands that don't touch you in your everyday lives or touch you in the background in a B2B environment. So those brands are not very well known to people. So when we represent our brands out there, we are the ambassadors. And I'm going to use I am the ambassador, right? Whoever stands on stage or talks to students, to talent, or whoever conducts that first interview is the ambassador to the company. How you represent your company at that moment is what really helps you in sourcing the right talent. Now, the market may be forgiving, or the market may be very active. It could be an employer's market, it could be an employee's market. But there's always a struggle to get good talent, because there will be more than one person trying to get good talent. How do you represent yourself in that first meeting, and how do you make your organization be that stage where that potential colleague of yours feels cared for, feels that his or her training and learning ladder would be good and something that they look forward to, and gives them an environment for to access good technology, access a good culture, and have access to a global environment, which then allows them to grow in turn. I think that's what people really look for. Gone are the days when people just look for a salary. Now they look for a lot beyond. And if you can represent that and be that person who brings that in a package to them, they buy it. And then it has to be, of course, it has to come with this authenticity and has to be validated. And that's when they start calling their friends and their colleagues into the organization. Because if you fall flat on your promises or whatever stage you've set, then you'll even lose the ones that you've hired. So that's a little bit about what really helps us in the stage here.
True, and I agree. Even the data backs that up in terms of how compensation and benefits, or the perception of competitive and industry-leading compensation and benefits, is correlated to being a top employer, but it is not a guarantee and it is not a necessity. So as long as you are competitive, these other factors need to really play in your favor. So thanks for that, Manoj. Continuing with our key takeaways, right? The second key takeaway is that there are variations across markets. For example, the average brand perception score in a market like the Philippines are relatively better than what we see in UK and Poland, even if you compare to other locations like India. Part of it we have seen is a cultural factor. how people in some cultures tend to criticize or appreciate more are relatively less or more encouraged to share feedback. But at the same time, these are all very mature global markets. So the data says something. On an average, in the last 3 years, the rating for Philippines have been about 12 to 15% higher. Even when we look at some of the same employers, they may still be top employer in multiple markets, but the ratings are still higher. So it is important to look at the cultural dynamics and how kind employees are to their employers. Asad, you not only are actively managing centers in different locations, or representing centers in different locations on behalf of your company, you are also leading in terms of the top employers in multiple markets. As you do that, and again, this is not just 1 year, you have maintained this year on year in some of these markets. Uh, Help us understand what goes on behind the scenes. I'm not sure it is as easy as Thomson Reuters gets to be a great brand. You get all the good talent, and then you show up and win these prizes. It's not at all easy. There's a lot of hard work behind the scenes. Tell us a little bit more about that. What can others learn from?
Sure, thank you, Rohit. As you rightly say, there's been a lot of thoughtful interventions that have been driven over the last. I've been with TR for the past 3.5 years, and I've seen the organization transcend. One of the big aspects from a strategy standpoint for TR has been that how do we want to identify our global centers? And we call our GBSs as global centers internally. And we don't treat them as a separate unit. It's another location in the global delivery footprint, right? So that actually is the fundamental ethos with which we work. In addition to that, what we've been focused with is trying to make sure that we have leaders where we have people who are working, right? So today, the global centers represent almost close to about 47, 48% of our global footprint. And at one stage, a few years back, our representation of leadership was quite different. And there has been, I would say, a very focused view of actually enabling leaders. And this has been not just bringing in leaders to do work for the local global centers, all of these leaders have a global mandate. So most of them actually hold a global portfolio where they actually sitting in India or in Philippines or in Mexico or in Poland are driving global mandates. Second, if you look at it, TR is in the business of information services. And we've been, from a customer standpoint, at the cutting edge of AI, especially what we offer to the customers. As that transition of enabling customers from an AI standpoint has been a big drive, we took a step back and said, how do we actually bring that and adopt those practices for our internal use through our workflow? Because it is necessary for employees to understand and be able to actually take that forward. And I would say over the last 12, 18 months, there's been a significant amount of investment that has been made in bringing in AI into the operations as well as technology. I mean, technology is a given because that's a front-ending capability. And then Gen AI has been one aspect. And today we are at a stage where we are actually launching our employee experience, single window of employee engagement and experience, by which I mean this will be a Gen AI enabled tool where an individual is able to actually navigate through the organization.
Wow.
And relating to that is a last point that I'd like to call out. You mentioned about the aspiration of individuals from a career standpoint. We saw the response where 64% of the participants mentioned that career development and career progression is a need. And that's something that was another self-reflection that we had, that a lot of members within the team mentioned, hey, I have been doing this job for the past 5 years. I would like to actually transition into something else. So we launched what is called as a career development program, and we developed an internal tool called Career Navigator, which has been launched across the enterprise. And that helps an individual sitting in operations or transformation, automation, technology to understand how to navigate the organization from a career standpoint. If I, in operation, have an aspiration to go into technology and be a part of technology, and within technology, I understand a particular role type, I have the understanding of how do I get there and what are the prerequisites required for me to be successful to reach that. So these factors enable us to actually drive the big picture, create stickiness and value proposition for employees, where they don't not only see their voices being heard at an enterprise level and not just in a siloed manner doing their job on a day-to-day basis, but a collaborative approach, and being able to participate in the vision and the strategy of the organization. Sorry, a long-winded answer, Rohit, but just wanted to make sure that I was able to share a few nuggets of what we've been driving.
So, absolutely, welcome. Asad, loved it. I think also the real examples of not just the career navigator tool or the Gen AI employee experience. By the way, congrats on that. I'm really keen to see how that unfolds. Our recent study shows, and then I'm diverting just for a tiny second, that as compared to 12 months ago, when only less than 10% GBS were actually trying to get some use cases into production on Gen AI, today almost 33% are getting one use case or more into production. And that's what it is, one use case or more. So combining that tech initiative with people initiative, really fascinating stuff, a lot of potential there. So keen to see how that unfolds. But also the other thing you said, representation. So for example, if you almost make up 50% of the organization, do you have maybe not 50, but still an appropriate amount of leadership? So that itself then works a big way, more than any amount of words can, reinforce the kind of career path that the GBS now provides. So thanks for sharing those examples. We'll keep unpacking this further in terms of the third big takeaway that the study, unveiled. What we're looking at, and then again, something that just now you mentioned as well, Asad, is that the perspective or the perceived lack of investment in career development in terms of upskilling remains a major concern. So the ratings for employers have dropped on this parameter. And if we look at which companies have done well year on year in the new entrance to top quadrant, and on the opposite side, which companies have dropped or moved away. So the ratings on this parameter have had a little bit of that effect, where they have been the differentiating factors. Manoj, while DSM's brand perception is really strong across multiple areas, right? So whether it is comp and ben, whether it is work environment, DNI, there are many areas where your perception is fairly good. You have, what is really impressive is managed to improve it year on year, along with your perception on some of the career development initiatives as well. And while Asad told us how they call their centers global centers, you have gone through a major rebranding exercise yourself. The organization has gone through a big merger, which again is a little bit of period of uncertainty for employees in an organization like a GBS. And usually sometimes there is a unintentional negative impact on the employee morale and everything with so much going on. So tell us, how did you navigate this situation where there was so much effort going into the merger and then the reorganization, and then the GES, as you call it now, was being rebranded? And how was that used as an opportunity to amplify or maybe course correct some of the work around employer branding?
Yeah, Rohit, you're right. I think change is the only constant that we're dealing with, sometimes in the form of a merger, sometimes an acquisition, or sometimes a divestment. These things hit us by surprise as employees. Some of us are part of the inner circle, we know them in advance, but majority of the colleagues get to know when everybody gets to know, when the share market gets to know. And it does cause uncertainty sometimes in the mind of employees. If you look at the employee's mindset, if I have to answer your question, if you look at the employee's mindset, when they join a GBS, they look at a career in two dimensions. One is building a career in a GBS environment, or secondly is also to be associated with the domain in which they're specializing in that environment. It could be procurement, it could be finance, it could be HR, it could be IT. If you can create an environment where they feel plugged into the domain as well as the GBS ecosystem, I think that's where they feel included and not a service provider. Because the risk of drawing lines, thick lines around, is you then sort of box yourself. And when you box yourself, you box the capabilities or the abilities for people to learn. And the rebranding exercise also allowed us to rename ourselves, rebrand ourselves, and reposition ourselves. So today we are known as Global Enterprise Services. Why? Because we serve the enterprise. We're no more a business service or operations, or we just kind of opened it up completely and we stopped calling our service delivery units as finance shared services or procurement shared services. We call ourselves Global Enterprise Services Finance, Global Enterprise Services Procurement. So we kind of opened up and people really feel plugged in. But that's one part of the perceived, I'm not saying there was never an intent to have grown people, but there's also perceived plug-in into the domain as well as into the GBS environment. The second part is your softer skills and your ability to do more and position yourself. And I think that's where once you see yourself participating at an equal level across the organization, in equally perceived forums, that's where people start feeling that they are well taken care of. Because at the end, people want to be taken care of. They want to be cared for. And if you can provide that environment, I think it brings that ecosystem. So it's about creating an ecosystem, not a transaction at a time that allows you to learn.
I agree, Manoj. And one very interesting thing is if I just draw a contrast between the positioning and the nomenclature that you are using and then Asad's organization is using, it also shows how there is no single right answer. So the way you are articulating the role and the story of GBS is the focus on solving enterprise problems, and hence GES. And then it needs to add up in terms of the role people really play, what they are being trained to do, equipped to do, what they are being celebrated for, all of that. And similarly, with 50% of the organization now sitting in these centers, what Asad's organization is really calling them those global centers. And then that's where it all needs to add up. So companies often ask, do we need a rebranding exercise? And then that's where the answer is that, it is not just a rebranding exercise. Probably if there's a lack of connect in the way what the purpose of the organization is, what your EVP is, and then what your branding is, then probably there is a need, but it's not as simple as a simple rebranding exercise. So that's another aspect that comes to mind as we talk about this. I will go ahead, Manoj.
No, I just wanted to agree with what you're saying. Rebranding is not the heck of changing a name. It's actually the essence of it, which needs to hit and it needs to get into the minds of people.
True. And just to cover the last couple of takeaways, is that generally as we look at all different aspects, people often ask, but all is good, but which parameter is most important? If I have to pick some, what should be my focus primarily on? Not an easy answer. People are really looking for a package deal, so it needs to be balanced. But work environment, comp and ben have greater correlation with the top employers. So if you are doing well in these areas, you are more likely to be in the top quadrant. Interestingly, when it comes to tech talent, work environment and diversity and inclusion have emerged as really interesting, top two parameters. And though this is not as counterintuitive as it used to be a little while back, it is still a bit there where people say in technology, diversity and inclusion is even more difficult. What some of the data shows is changing is that employees are not willing to accept that because legacy-wise, this is more difficult, so deal with it. What they really are looking for are employers who still make an effort to provide a more diverse organization, and not just in terms of gender, but all different types of diversity, depending on where the center is, what type of work they are doing. what all different types of diversity they can focus on, but also improve on the inclusion factor. So that has really improved. And another point is that where we started, this continues to be a very volatile topic. For example, if we were to look on the universe of top employers from last year, almost 2 in 5 have dropped out of that quadrant. Right, so it's a result of multiple factors: their individual ratings, their peers' individual ratings, how the overall industry moved, so some of the averages moved. But it is not that everybody is slipping. Almost 1 in 5 have improved their year-on-year ratings. Others have remained stable. And we look at a change of 5% or more vis-a-vis last year's rating, and in one way. So, there are companies who have been doing better year-on-year, continue to be top employers, but it is not a given. What Asad, you were saying earlier, it requires continuous work and continuous course correction. And the way you then also commented on this, Manoj, I love that part, that employee expectations are also evolving. What really worked last year might not work today because it is a fast-paced environment, right? In 14 months, 15 months, Gen AI has started getting so democratized. From first time hearing about ChatGPT, sometimes my mother is now using the Meta AI in her WhatsApp chat now, right? And then she's more comfortable with that than she ever has been with Google, because she can talk like she's talking to somebody, a person, and the series of questions can kind of bake in the context of the conversation so far, and she can get a summary of results rather than reading blogs. So she who was not using computer in her day-to-day life feels much more comfortable with that kind of AI. So the pace at which the environment is changing is also impacting these areas. Asad, let me ask you one last question on this. The key takeaways is that your organization has been among the best in investing in career development and skilling initiatives. So from your vantage point, and I can confirm that from our independent research, GBS organizations and tech centers have increased the L&D spend on an average by 2x. Some companies will do even better, some might not do that much, but on an average in the last 3 to 5 years, L&D spend has gone up by 2x. Why do you still think employees are seeing kind of reporting a lack of a dip in the perception of this aspect? Why do employees still believe organizations are not doing enough? What might be the disconnect? I get it as it may not be all an answer based on your organization, but a little bit of your observations broadly. But why do you think that there is this disconnect?
I think the struggle is basically on twofold, right? Number one, it has to be tailor-made to the needs of people in different domains, segments within an organization. Now, when you look at Gen AI, that is something that is actually, if I look at an example within TR, we've actually gone across the board, across the organization, and said that's a foundational learning and understanding everyone needs to have. We have not only actually opened up training, but also we have an in-house developed GPT-4 based tool, which has been opened up to everyone within the organization, not just learn theoretical, but go test and learn, experiment, right? So that is an essential aspect. That are you training for them to learn and remember? Are you training them to learn and apply, right? How do you actually take them to the last mile of application? If I take a step back, even with our approach to RPA about a year and a half back, where it was actually before Gen AI disrupted everything and became the center of focus, we developed a program called, we named it funnily BYOB. It's called Build Your Own Bots, right? And the whole idea was democratization. We have a network of champions who have been trained and who've actually gone about ensuring that every function has champions who can drive that at pace and are part of that team's core working environment. So the fact is, today, when the new generation is coming in, they're coming in with a lot of already advanced knowledge. And when you look at folks like us who've been furnitures within this industry, spent 25, 30 years on a lighter note, we have to catch up. And we have to make sure that we are ourselves walking the talk and are able to actually lead by example and not just by looking at just outcomes, and be part of that conversation, and not have I mean, I would say we keep our egos aside, because you have smarter people who are coming in, part of your ecosystem, who are much more technically advanced in being able to actually apply those and don't come with any biases in terms of what learning and training needs to be. It also is a factor of how are you pacing it out, right? Are you overloading everyone at the time of induction and saying, all right, just get on with it, these are the mandatory trainings and be done with it? Or it's actually paced out through? And is the training linked to your career aspirations through the tenure of the employee within the organization? So those are some of the aspects I would believe are essential for an individual to feel that the learning is for me on an ongoing basis. It's multifold. And I'll give a challenge that TR had. TR actually services a large legal portfolio for North America. And if you look at the maturity of legal professionals within India, is not as mature in terms of how to the level of what we have within North America. So we had that gap, and we needed to actually augment that gap. And for that, there was a concerted effort to make sure that people were able to understand. So any leaders who came in, there was training programs which were defined for them to actually understand product and take that back and apply. So rather than going into too much detail, my submission would be that training needs to be at a pace through the course of their employment. It needs to be aligned to their aspirations, and it needs to help tools that need to be given to them to apply those learnings and be able to actually successfully embed that as part of their day-to-day.
Got it. No, thanks a lot, Asad, for sharing those examples. Though for a moment I was also thinking if BYOB is a cheat code, for EVP. But no, on a serious note, that could do wonders in the short term, but probably not as much. Coming back to serious topics, right? So we have about 10 minutes left, and what we have been integrating some of the questions that come in Q&A and the questions that were submitted before the session into the conversation. But let me spend next 5 minutes, talking about something else. There are often a lot of popular beliefs in the industry when it comes to brand perception topics. So what we did is we listed some of the popular beliefs and we then saw what the data says, right? So let's go through these together, but I encourage everyone to submit their questions in Q&A. In case there are more doubts or any other questions that you want answered. But let's start with some of the popular beliefs, right? So the first very popular defense we hear when we take this feedback to companies is that large organizations have favorable brand perception. So because we are small, we are likely to be, at a little bit of back foot. Data, and not just this year, very strongly over the last several years, so thousands of companies says data shows size does not guarantee a positive brand perception. There is very limited relationship. So we believe very strongly that this is a false belief. And then there is another related one related to age, that GBS entities that have been established for very long tend to have a stronger brand perception. While there is some correlation between the age and the brand perception of the GBS, it is again a relatively weak correlation and may not, maybe more of a correlation with less cause and effect, relationship. So again, we believe that is not true. Let me ask you this, Manoj. While DSM for Managed does some brilliant work globally, coming to your center in India, this is not exactly your household name, right? And Manoj, we spoke about this when we first met, but I had the fortune of kind of doing my first professional stint right out of college and a small internship in DSM. And till this day, even people in my family don't completely know what DSM does, right? It's just not that sort of company. It's a B2B organization in many aspects, and just the way, not that popular brand. So how do you manage to build the strong brand perception for your targeted employees when you are not the largest, you have not been there for 3-4 decades, and you're not exactly a popular household name?
Great question, Rohit. In fact, the first time when I was approached by a headhunter for this company, I said, which company are you talking about? So that was my reaction to the headhunter as well. But the fact of the matter is, there are a handful of brands that are known to people. And if you take the whole startup ecosystem, if you take all the companies that are opening up GBS today, they are brands which are still making a name for themselves. What makes the key difference is the vision and the purpose for which this company has been established. And if you can associate yourself with that purpose and be able to convey that with conviction, people follow you because people follow a purpose. So if I take DSM, legacy DSM before the merger and now DSM Firmenich, there is a commitment to sustainability and there is authentic action which we put in place to show that we are committed to sustainability. There's a commitment to safety and care, which we show and we demonstrate. Just an example I can give you is that in our office, we cannot climb the staircases without holding the railing. It is mandatory to hold the railing while climbing up the staircase. Now, it took a while for me to understand that, but I believe in it so much that I make my kids also do that now at home, because when your hand is on the railing, your mind is on the stairs. Sounds simple, but these are those actions that the more and more you communicate, the more you represent, the more you talk about the values, the purpose, and what we are, much beyond the work, people start associating with that. And that's when size doesn't matter, purpose matters, values matter, and your ability to contribute to that begins to matter. That's how the brands are built. That's how purposes are built, and that's how you really kind of represent yourself in the market. And of course, it has to be authentic. And I say this again and again.
So it's a brilliant point, and kind of I'm a big Harry Potter fan, so it reminds me of that one line from Albus Dumbledore in one of the conversations. He said, "For people who care, that's all the difference that matters." So, and employees do care these days, about these little things. In fact, it relates to the next belief, right? People believe companies in certain headquartered in a certain location have a better brand perception. So, from a correlation perspective, yes, we see that. We see US headquartered companies have a better brand perception relatively in India and Philippines. And then data-wise, statistically, European headquarters companies do better in Poland. Part of it might also be what you are saying, Manoj, is that how companies in certain who originate and are still led by certain geographies push certain elements of ways of working, and that relate more to some people, though it is an increasingly globalized talent market. But we see data show some of this correlation, so it is very interesting. Hence, we kind of the verdict is true. There is another popular belief that employees prefer to work in certain verticals or certain industries as compared to others. Again, statistically, this comes out to be true. We see GBS employees preferring organizations in banking, financial services, retail, and CPG more than others. But the irony is that today we are celebrating two organizations that don't necessarily fit either. And why only reason I frame it like that is that DSM has a little bit of very unique portfolio. So some might see you related to CPG, some might see you in other sectors. So what it indicates, and going back to our 2x2s, which are there in the report, there are companies of all verticals in the top quadrant. So while we label it true statistically, there is still enough room for companies from other industries to be in the top. Lastly, the popular belief is that the companies that are co-located with their business in certain markets have a substantially larger challenge because the business brand pulls them down. We have seen a correlation between the business brand and the GBS brand, but it works both ways. So it is a rather convenient to declare it as a challenge, not as a something that is an influence. So we declared this to be false, but we have seen some undue influence both ways, positive and negative. So as a GBS, you do need to watch out for what that brand positioning is for the broader company, and to what extent does GBS wants to piggyback on it, or stay associated. Versus, we have seen companies who have intentionally chosen very different names, very unique brand positioning, all of that. We have a couple of minutes left, so just one last question for you, Asad. As you look at your centers with a very global portfolio, both in terms of the talent, but also in terms of your business model, how do you see the need to balance between one brand positioning globally, two localized needs, across each talent market you operate in? So how do you think companies should balance their EVP at a global and a local level?
I think that's a great question, Rohit. I can maybe give some examples from a TR standpoint, which are relevant to this question. So, I mean, the ethos within TR for a unified global EVP is to ensure that team members are able to contribute not just to local initiatives, but have the freedom and support to drive global programs and priorities. This has enabled us to ensure that the colleagues feel valued, they have a sense of accomplishment, and of being able to contribute to the larger TR vision and strategy. One of the aspects is, for example, the HR policies are global. However, there are local nuances added to customize that to the need of the experience of that geo. One essential global aspect that we continue to work and evolve is on diversity. And at workplace, the local adoption on this is quite essential because we just don't drive gender-based diversity across the organization. We have various other aspects. For example, in North America, we drive Asian Affinity Network, Black Employee Network, Indigenous programs, Indigenous People Network for Canada, and so on. However, when we look at India, we've been driving India and Philippines and our global centers. One example for India, while we have gender diversity as one of the aspects, we also launched an initiative around inclusion. So we drove a program 2 years back around neurodiverse hiring. And we launched an internship program, which has been very successful. And we have a few members from that actually today working with us. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is when you look at programs.
Asad, my apologies. Just a couple of seconds to interrupt. Manoj, I know you have to move on to your next discussion. We'll wrap up in 1 minute. But thank you so much for joining and your inputs, and congratulations again on your organization's success. And we continue to track this topic, as we evolve.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you so much. And all the best, Rohit. And thank you, Asad, for being a co-panelist.
Thanks, Manoj. Great.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.
Thanks. Sorry for the interruption, Asad. Back to you, and we'll wrap up after your response.
Yeah, I mean, just one last other point, right? I mean, when we look at learning and development, that's again a global program. And I'll just call out one where we launched a leadership training program. And it wasn't just open to members across the global locations, but we had a lot of participants who actually spent time in one of the Ivy League colleges within US. So that's the adoption and balancing act that is required from driving the employee value proposition, which I would see. There are more examples that I can share, but again, it's necessary to have that distinction because you need to understand the skill, talent, requirement, maturity of your centers and how you want to actually bring up the capability, contribution, and their sense of being part of the larger picture for the organization.
That's very well said, Asad. Absolutely agree. I wish we had more time to talk about it. But my reminder to everyone is that the recording will be available, the document will be available, and we've tried to take as many questions as we could. But feel free to send us your questions offline, and you will see the links to full reports that we have published for this year. And congratulations to all the top employers. And Shivangee's reminder earlier on call to action, how you all can request for your company's assessment. So feel free to make the best use of this advantage